does that make you feel?
Makes me feel happy and joyful that I was part of their day.
Great. All right, cut. We have an ender, and we have other options too. But now, what I did was this. Number one, I went digging. I definitely went digging. She gave us some great answers, but she got stumped on one. And I wanted to get something out of her, and I wasn't gonna give up on her. I wanted to get something out of that, right? And of course, I'm editing in my head. Really, we didn't have time. We're in the middle of a workshop here, but normally what I would do is I would actually try to set up a phone call with Pam and say, hey Pam, this is days, weeks before the shoot. Say, hey Pam, tell me a little bit, we're gonna talk about your filmmaking career. Tell me a little bit about the backstory, like what's the story and what do you love and this and that and blah, blah, blah. And it would give us ideas for shooting supporting B-roll too. So now I would know, oh, I gotta ask her about this and I gotta ask her about that. And she was very passionate about this. Or I didn't know about that. I'm gonna ask her a little bit more about that. Know the entire story. Of course, if she was just one part of the entire story, we'd have to know where she fits. Maybe she's one of the sections of Act 2, or maybe she's how it ends, or maybe she's the main character in this and everything revolves around her. But the idea is to know more than just the one person you're interviewing too, know that story. But once we get past that, and this is all done in pre-production, like she said, that's very important. You see what I said earlier? I said, Pam, are you comfortable? Are you in your zone? Blah, blah, blah. I always do that. I want them to be comfortable. I don't want them to be like stiff and like not be themselves. Set guidelines, that was look at me, don't look at the lights, don't look at the camera. She did a great job with that. I mean, I wouldn't say if anyone, but if I sat in here and was interviewed, I'd be intimidated. I'd see the lights. Even though we do this, I wouldn't, it'd take me a little bit to get warmed up. It's tough to be behind the lights. Now she's doing it in front of you guys, her peers. I mean, it's not an easy thing to do. So we know this stuff. We're aware of how much our self-esteem might get, pounded in. Now put somebody who's not even involved in this industry and they get like, oh my God, this is like really professional. Like, I didn't know it was gonna be like this, and they're all like intimidated there. So you really gotta help them out. So eyeline, so that's part of me and you having a conversation. I don't want him looking over there. I don't want him looking over there. Now, she did a really good job, but if I found that she kept peeking up and looking at you guys, I would say, guys, get out of the eyeline. Let's go over here. So it's just us. So sometimes that can affect, but she did a great job with that. Listen. Okay, here's one. Has anyone in this room ever interviewed anyone and said, okay, where were you born? And they're like, oh, well, I was born in Chicago in 1948, and then afterwards I moved to, Arizona. It's like, all right, when were you born? I just answered that. It's like, you're not listening. You're paying attention to your words, right? So the idea, and I've done it, I've been completely embarrassed, and I'm like, oh, next question. But the idea is, I'm listening to her. I'm curious. That's how you do it. It's a very easy trick. Be curious. Follow the story. So that's what I did. I had no idea what she was going to say, and I listened to her and I followed the story. I had a few questions in my head, but I wasn't sitting there and looking at them on paper. I was actually paying attention. Eye contact. This is part of the eye line, but really, again, if she's like going all over the place or she's looking down a lot, I'm losing her. Look at me here. This is where I was, right? Now watch. I like being right next to the camera. It's a very intimate, close feeling. I feel like we're close to her. Watch the image. Let's interview now. Turn the whole chair. Let's look. Let's talk now. She's completely disconnected from me. I can't get into the story. So the one thing about positioning, I make sure she's very close to the camera. Not looking at the camera, but very close, in this zone. Once I go too far out, it really takes away from the story. I'm interviewing the person and he's got the notes and he's holding it in his hand and he's looking down. We don't do that anymore. As soon as I see notes in the hand, I'm like, let's say his name is Gary. Hey Gary, all right, I just want you to get a glance at the notes, know what you're doing. Okay, good. All right, I'm taking the notes away from you. You're not even gonna be able to grab them. I'm taking them away and we're gonna put them here. You have to answer the questions as a person and not as a robot, okay? Well, but I need my notes. No, you don't. Now, of course, I know the subject because we did a little bit of pre-production, right? So I'm sitting there and I'm like, okay, Gary, listen, I'm gonna help you so that you can be Gary. I don't want you to be the guy reading the notes. I want you to be Gary. You know this stuff. Yeah, but there's 4 bullet points and I gotta make sure I hit them all. Don't worry, I'll get them there. Because we're gonna edit this. So let's say the 4 bullet points are domestic equities, international equities, fixed income, and alternative investments. So anyway, he's got to go through those 4 bullet points, right? So now I asked him a question and I'm like, all right, so Gary, tell me about, let's start off with domestic and international equities. What's going to happen this next quarter? What are you guys, setting up to do for your clientele? And how are you, positioning yourself? And he's like, well, we think this is underweight and this is overweight. And he starts going through his spiel. And then he goes and he gets that and he goes, and I'm going to sit there and I'm going to say, okay, well, let's talk about fixed income. Oh, yes, fixed income. Well, with fixed income, blah, 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 blah. And I'm grabbing what I need to grab. And I'm like, okay, now what about alternative investments? And he's like, oh, yeah, that's a good one. So alternative investments, now we're having a conversation. And this guy's not reading notes. He knows the answers. He just needs them as a guide. But if you let them take those notes, you're going to get the robot Gary. You're not going to get the real Gary. As soon as you take them away and you guide them, you need to know the subject with them. I mean, granted, I don't know the knowledge, but I know what we're talking about, and we're going to help him go along. But we need Gary to be Gary, not robot Gary. So those interview notes are a big no-no. Be curious, follow the story. I said that before, and I was curious. That's probably one of the biggest tips up there that I've learned, and it took me years to learn that as an interviewer, and now I've realized that's how we get the best stuff, just being curious. Happy hour line. All right, so let's say he's doing everything the way old corporations talk. I'm like, this is not Gary. Like, I'm missing Gary. I'm getting corporate Gary. I want real Gary. I want hangout Gary. He's like, and he starts laughing. I'm like, Gary, you and me, we're hanging out. It's happy hour. TGI Fridays. We haven't seen each other in a few years. We start having a conversation. Oh, what are you up to? Oh my God, I haven't seen you in so long. Great. What do you do now? Oh, I'm a project manager. What does a project manager do? What do you actually do as a project manager? Oh, well, basically we do this and we do that and blah, blah, blah. He starts talking to me. He's not trying to worry about filling in exact lingo from his corporate structured, whatever he does. I don't know. They talk like they're robots, right? He's just being himself. So I sit there and I'm like, Gary, if we were just hanging out, how would you answer that? And he says this thing. I'm like, that's the Gary I'm missing. That's exactly who I want, right? And you almost wish you record. And sometimes you can just keep it rolling. And you get it. Now, sometimes it doesn't work. Or sometimes you get Gary, and then you turn the camera on and you go again, and you get old Gary again. You get robot Gary again. Like, what the hell are you going to do? So what we'll do is, if worst case scenario, don't record this. That means record this. All right? Make sure the tally light's off, too. Like, what's a red light? Oh, that's a standby light. Anyway. So don't record this. It's amazing what happens. It doesn't happen often, but we've done it. And don't record this, and they're recording, or they don't think they're being recorded, and you get these amazing moments, these real moments, because now their guard's down, because they're not afraid anymore. They're not intimidated. And sometimes you can use bits of that or the whole thing, but again, you want to give them encouragement. Like, Gary, that's the Gary I love. That's the one I want. Oh my God, I need this Gary. And he's like, yeah, dude, that was awesome. And he's like, I did do a good job. Oh yeah, that's right. Okay, let's go. This is easy. Let's do this. He's all like, so the idea is to get that real Gary, not the corporate Gary. And again, all these little tricks help. Sometimes you have hard interviews. Sometimes you have easy interviews. It's the nature of the business. But these tricks will help, because we don't want that robot Gary ever. And I've seen so many interviews where you see, and you're like, you could have done so much better to get the best out of that person. Let's say Gary is not getting any encouragement from us. And he's sitting there, in his head, he's going, oh man, he's not saying nothing. That must have sucked. I suck. Everything sucks. Everything. I'm screwing this whole thing. I shouldn't have went out drinking last night. This is horrible, this and that, blah, 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 whatever he's saying in his head. And if we give him some bit of encouragement, like, Gary, that was awesome. And he's like, oh, well, now I know what to do. Right. That's all you need from me? Okay, I can do that. And he gets that thing. You got to give him that encouragement, because he needs to know when he's going down the right path. This is a very powerful line. We've asked this. I asked this on the Make-A-Wish films that we do, and other inspirational films. The last question of the day: is there anything I forgot to ask you? That's one of those in the end questions. Sometimes the most inspirational, most emotional stories can come out. Things that they wanted to get across, but I didn't ask them. So it's a really good one to throw in. Allow for silence. As uncomfortable as it can be, if they're about to break down and cry, and we've had our share of characters get up and just leave and say, I can't do this. But we didn't stop them. We wanted to see them get up and leave. Not because we wanted to see them go through pain, but because we didn't know what they would do. We didn't know what they would say. And they might say the most emotional thing. And in our business, like, we're trying to tell stories, especially to help people in nonprofits. So if they say something that's so emotional that makes the cut, and in the end can make the film that much more powerful to make people aware, inspire people to give back more money, I want the hero. I want the home run. And if that could happen, I'm not going to say a word. I'm going to be as uncomfortable as I need to be. And I'm going to sit there going, Adam, say something. Adam, say something. This is horrible. Just say something. And I'm not going to say a word. I'm just going to let it be and let him do the speaking. They say that in sales too. There's a technique in sales where they'll say something like, here's a cool line. I don't use it as much as I should, but I should. It's a cool line. You say you're negotiating, and you come up with a deal that you think is fair, and you say, how about this? Why don't we do this and that, and end it like this? Is that fair? When you say, is that fair? And don't say a word. If it takes them 2 minutes to answer, don't say a word. The next person to break is them, not you. And that's like a power control struggle with sales. It's a pretty cool technique. I like listening to audiobooks about sales techniques and stuff. If you don't know about salesmen, but it helps me tell story, it helps me sell the company, helps me to sell myself, and it's a cool little trick, but it's the same concept of like, I'm not gonna say, the next word's gonna be said by him or her. It's not gonna be said by me, because something amazing could come out of it. Steer the dialogue. So we did a pretty good job. I did steer the dialogue a little bit, but not really. When I mean steer the dialogue, I mean if she went off on a rant about living in Chicago for 15 minutes and I'm like, the point was just to give you a warm-up question. I'm not really gonna use this. You know, it's like, I don't care about your dog in Chicago. Let's talk about filmmaking. So there's a point where you have to, do you have a dog in Chicago?
No.
So there is a point at which you have to take control of the conversation and steer it to a place where you're going to use it. Because sometimes, or maybe they answer the question, but they start going off way too much in detail, and you know you're not going to use it in the edit, and you don't have time. I only have 20 minutes with this person. I got to get these questions out. So you got to take control, cut in, and you got to steer that question. So sometimes that happens. And then inspirational enders, I gave you examples there. I'm always trying to get things, because I want to know, like, how is this edit going to end? You know, and if she says something like, in the end, you know, if you do this or you do that, you'll be happy. You know, whatever her line is, whatever she does. And you can't, an ender is not this. In the end, I think if you're true to your roots with filmmaking, well, and the other thing is, and they start going, and they're like, you just had it. It's like, dun, 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 dun. No, say it! Dun. So you want to get that back. You want to get that, the melody of her voice has to be like this. It's got to end the sentence, and in the end, it makes us better people. Like, that's an ending. You can hear the melody of my voice. But if I'm like, in the end, it makes us better people? No, that's not an ender. We need something else. So you got to go fishing for that and grab that. But once you get that ender and you know you can use that to lock it in somewhere, you know you have everything you need. So just always paying attention to that, always trying to be an editor in the process. Don't get me wrong. We have clients where we can't get the control we want. You guys are never going to see those films. But the thing is, you know, it's like, all right, here we go, robot, autopilot, here we go. You know, that's an autopilot gig. You want to be able to have control to steer it in the right way. And there's nothing wrong with them asking some key questions, because maybe they have some questions that help and they're very colorful and you didn't even think of it. But the whole teleprompter thing, like, you're never going to get genuine out of teleprompter. Don't get me wrong, there is a time to use a teleprompter. When you use a teleprompter, you know, or they're talking to the camera, you know, for us, it's more internal videos. It's like the CEO talking to the employees. Or if it's like a PSA and they're talking to the, you know, it's not an eavesdropping interview, character driven like this. It's more like, I'm talking to you and this is the message that I'm giving you. And there are reasons to do that. But as far as the scripting thing like that, you know, it comes down to that step that we reached beforehand where we're like, listen, is this a reactive or a proactive job? Do you trust us? If we do this, you have to be smart enough to say, if we do this, it's not going to be that good. But if you do it my way, then it's going to be better. And if you believe it and you trust in yourself, you need to instill that onto your client, and hopefully they buy into it. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. But in those situations, there are some times where you can't. And you're like, all right, whatever, I tried, you know, and you do your thing. Ultimately, you could say, I'm not going to take the gig, I'm an artiste. I only work my way. Or you could say, make some extra money. You know, this will be this won't be on the public portfolio, but it's business. We're in business, right? So there's enough gigs to go around where you can actually inspire them to be proactive and you do the stories you want to do. And again, those are the ones you put on your website because when clients come and see, they only see the good stuff.